just telling about when Monty got the scar on the right-hand side of his face. So he'll tell you the story one more time. Short version, please.
Well, she got that all, didn't you?
Yeah, I got it, but it's okay. We can go on.
Oh, yeah, she got it.
Oh, okay.
So you had cows and horses at the barn, or at the farm?
Oh, yeah, a bunch of cows. No cows and.
We had some riding horses also. My dad rode when I was a kid.
Oh,
Real
okay.
little.
And we had a pony.
And we had two ponies.
Two ponies.
Oh, wow.
And when Ken was 5, he got Betty a Shetland pony for his for Christmas. And it was the back room of the house, and we were all so excited once we saw that pony. And then ultimately, Betty had another pony called Trixie.
Yep.
And that was mine.
Oh.
When Ken and I first went to school, we drove a buggy with Betty, it had shack, to Chaska from the farm and across the railroad tracks and to my grandmother Meuwissen's place down by the railroad track, and put the horse and buggy right in, or the Shetland pony and buggy right in the barn, and just stayed like that until we got out of school, and then we drove it back.
Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of fun.
They took her. Do you remember the time when Betty got away? They were coming back from school one time, and the Beggarman kids that we're talking about used to ride in with them a lot of the time.
Okay.
And they were coming back, and they dropped the Beggarman kids off, and they were going, and Betty, like all Shetland ponies, there's the farm 6 blocks away, and Betty took off and running with the pony and this two-wheel buggy, and they couldn't stop her.
Oh.
And she kept on running, and she's heading for the barn, and evidently somewhere along the line she hit a bump, and Ken might have been alone. And he was bounced out of the buggy.
Oh, jeez.
And the Betty kept right on going for the barn. That same barn door we're talking about was open.
Yeah.
And he hit that door, and buggy just, kaplong, that buggy caught the door, the pony got in, and he tore things apart pretty well.
Do you remember that, or was it a story?
No, I vaguely remember that.
So the pony's name was Betty and Trixie?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then Betty, when we first moved to town, I was 7 years old. And we moved to town, and somewhere along the line, we had Trixie for a while. We sold Trixie, but we kept Betty for another couple of years, or a year anyway, when we were in town. And I remember we used to go up to the park in Chaska, the Central Park there, and they used to cut the grass up there. And we talked the guys up there when they cut it. They'd pick up the grass, the catcher, and we'd go up to have a big pile of it. We'd go up with the buggy and load it all up and take it home, and that's what we fed Betty. There is the grass room up there. And but I remember Betty so well, we used to ride her. And she would go lickety-split, and we'd ride her bareback.
Okay.
And all of a sudden she'd see a hole or something, and Betty would make a turn. And I mean, she'd go just like that and turn. He'd go fly up to the pony, and you're just going to hang on to it. You just leave it. You just leave it. But I remember a little bit of that,
So she had like a rein to hang on to.
Oh yeah, she had her mane, and we were good enough that we just ride that pony, But there was no saddle most of the time. I don't know if they ever had a saddle for her. Do you remember? Now Trixie had a saddle.
I'm going to move on, otherwise you can read forever on Betty and Trixie.
Yeah, that's what happened last time. I'm going to turn this up.
Yeah, you got to move Monty along.
I know.
Next step.
Here, just gonna. I just wanted to make sure it was long enough. Okay, anything else about each of the kids that you want to remember, or your mom and dad? Or should I can ask more this individual questions?
Well, my memories of my mom is that she was a really good woman. She was a fun person, and when I was a young woman, she was considered to be my sister.
Oh, really?
It took me a long time to grow enough so that or for her to get older, because she was so young when she had Ken and I and Monty and Bob, really.
How old was she when she had you?
I think she was only 17, going on
Wow.
18. She might have been 19, but because Ken was already a year plus. But we're real close, a year and a half at the most.
Okay.
And then 2 years between Monty and I. But what was I going to tell you? Something else that I forgot. Well, the economy was, we moved off the farm because of the Depression of 1929. And we were still there till 1933 when Dad's herd got some kind of a disease, I don't know what they call it, but everybody's herds were devastated by that. And then we had to move to town. I think it was 1933, it might have been 34 by the time we got there. I didn't remember that I was already 9 or so when we moved to town from our
I was
calculations. Yeah. And we moved into, what was the name of that house? Anyway, it was down West First Street, way down toward the creek or the railroad track.
No, that was the second house.
No, that was the first one.
The first one was up on the hill. Up by the
No, that was the second one.
Oh, was it? Oh.
Because Susie was born and we were up the hill then, and I used to let her run down the hill with the baby buggy and then run after her. It was not a good idea. I would never have let it.
We lived, the first, was the first one down, down where Ken used to live by the creek down there? Was that the first one?
Only on the other side, on the main street, yeah. I think that's West First Street.
Yeah, it is going down towards the ballpark that way.
Yes.
Okay.
Down past where Clarence Soley and down that way where we used to live down.
Well, Soley lived up where our big house was.
Yeah, a while closer, yeah, but they were down there towards the ballpark. Then we moved up on the hill up on,
right.
I really thought it was the other way
And
around.
then we moved down to the big house, the Lano house, across the street from where Mom and Dad died. That's the Lano house.
At one time we lived down where by Lano's, in that brick house that got flooded, next to Wenzel's.
Oh, yeah, we did. Okay, that was the second house, Mom.
Okay, all right.
We went from that way down street to that one, and then up the hill,
Okay.
where Susie was about, and then we went to the big house.
Kitty corner from where they lived.
What I call the Lano house.
Yeah.
It was owned by the Lano. And she sold it out from under Dad. And then we moved to the big house down by the Chaska River, or by the bridge.
On the main street down there, right across from...
And then finally the folks moved into that little house.
Right.
So that was 6 moves.
Wow, that is. And did they bought that one house?
The last house they bought. The rest of them I think it was...
I was when you rented for $25 a month.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was renting all the rest.
The big one was $25 a month. The other ones might have been even cheaper.
Wow.
But there were a lot of Tommy stories. Tommy came along somewhere, and I was long gone, but I remember being home, and the river had flooded, and he had gone across with his bicycle over to Peter's house. And so here's this big water thing between him and we never could find him. He was always gone. Anyway, we finally got him. I don't know how we did that, but they got him back across. And then he took his bike one day and went down to Shorty Brewer's bar, which is totally on the other end of town from where we lived.
Oh, he did a lot of traveling.
He was on the move. And then Mary, of course, I don't remember because
you were in Alaska when she was born.
Yeah, I was.
See, I was in the service when Mary was born.
Oh, okay.
She was a year and a half old before I saw her.
Yeah.
See, I went in service in 45, and she was born right after I left.
And one day we were playing ball, and I was batting, and Monty was catching behind me, and I swung the bat and knocked him out cold. Absolutely.
That's what's wrong with me.
Everybody from the field was running up to find out what the matter was. I had no idea, but here's this guy just spread out.
So what did you used to play for games?
Kick the can, hound lost a track, football on the street.
What was the second one you said?
Hound
Hounds
Lost the Track.
Hound Lost the Track.
Did you ever play Hound Lost the
Ah, I
Track?
never played that one.
Oh.
That's sort of like a hide and seek.
Marty, who was it that got the teeth stuck in who? Was it Bob that stuck his teeth in your head? Running one night, and it was dark out, and ran into each other. And
Oh.
it was. I thought it was you that got it
Might have been.
in the teeth in
I don't
the head,
remember
or
that.
maybe it was the reverse. But anyway, that was kind of a tragic time.
Oh my gosh, you guys had,
Oh,
surprised
yeah.
you guys survived.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, we've always said it.
I know.
We've always said it. We can't believe that we survived.
One of the stories that we used to tell too was when the folks would leave, we had a big truck, and I would teach the boys to drive.
Oh.
This big truck, they'd back it out. That was when we lived in the big house. And I'd let you drive around the block, and finally we got caught, of course.
Oh, okay. You weren't supposed to be doing that.
No.
How old do you think you were?
We were probably 10 or 11.
Yeah, the boys were. I was a little older. Ken was never home. He was a trapper, and he'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go trapping. But he also stayed in his young adult years. I think he wasn't a young adult. He was, I would say, probably from the time he was 12 to 16. He lived at the Schroers' house more than he lived at home. He's just gone all the time.
The Schroers' house, when we had the house up on Highway 41, going up the hill, I think it was the third house we were in. That's where she hit me with the bat. I mean, there's a cemetery. You go up a little road there, about 3 blocks, and there's a Schroers. They raised chickens. And they raised a lot of chickens and sold them. And the Schroers boys and Ken would hunt and fish and that, and they were always good friends, trapping and everything else. And when we moved, Ken didn't want to be down in town. He wanted to be up there. So half the time he stayed at the Schroers' house.
Yeah, I never really figured out why
Yeah,
it was.
and that's really what happened. When we moved, he didn't want to move. You know, he's just old enough that he sort of wanted to stay there.
Yeah.
So he always liked hunting and doing all that stuff.
That's all Ken ever did.
So what did he trap?
Muskrats. See, in those days you could trap muskrats, and they skin them out, and they'd sell the fur.
Oh, okay.
And but he'd trap rabbits, and shoot rabbits. Well, he kept I remember in our younger days, in the early Depression days, Ken would go hunting, and he'd bring home squirrels, rabbits, pheasants, ducks.
Okay.
Had to clean them up, and that's what we ate. He kept them a lot of times because they couldn't afford much anyway. So they don't throw pheasants or rabbits. They clean them up, and we'd eat them. You remember all that? Ken, every night after school, he'd go hunting.
Oh.
We had little money in those days.
Oh yeah.
And my dad, in order to make things survive, there was what was called a WPA, and he would haul, how did it go? He would haul apples to South Dakota and bring back potatoes.
Okay.
Yeah.
He did that for, a fall or a summer,
He always
whatever,
did that.
fall in the fall.
He had a
And
he had a 2-ton dump truck, which is sort of a big can, looked like a covered wagon, and he'd close it all up.
And then he started to let's see, they leased trucks for hauling gravel. And Dad's truck would be leased as well as his services.
Oh, okay.
And he made money that way.
He drove
That's
the truck.
different.
Drove the truck for the county and the state, haul gravel for different
John
people.
Lano.
Yeah, John Lano and all the contracting. They get a job working on a road. They do it today at these tandem dump trucks. You see, most of the days, one guy owns that truck, and he leases them out to the different companies, and he's running around the Twin Cities and hauling gravel. In fact,
Don't get too far away now.
no. In fact, you know who does that? Is Dolores and Wally's oldest daughter, married to a guy. That's what he does for a living today. He's got Duffy. He's got a dump truck, and he hauls gravel.
So how did he ever buy his dump truck?
My dad?
No,
I don't know.
Probably on
Credit.
time and payments, because we never really had much money. My mom sewed for the boys. She sewed suits out of clothes of the older people, cut them all up and sewed, and they looked pretty good. And she sewed for me, tailored me all the way through high school, and even when I left home, she would still tailor slack for me. I thought she was pretty good.
So she sewed all your clothes and everything else, and then every day you would talk about how much she would bake.
Oh yeah, she baked a ton. She always welcomed my friends. I had a ton of friends at that time because they came from these smaller towns around to go to high school. And she baked, and my friends were always welcome, even when they were bad.
You know, they were living in a little house, and they had these gals sleeping all over the place. All her friends were around her sleeping all. They'd find someplace to sleep on the floor or something. Let's see.
The East Union girls.
Yeah. Pearl Hillstrom, the Johnson twins, all these gals were around her all the time.
So she never worked, and she just worked at home, right?
No. Grandma, mother for a while, her and Aunt Clara, Clara Winkle.
Clara Meuwissen Winkle. That would be Uncle Con's,
Yeah,
Roger
Clara,
and Janet's.
Roger and Janet's mother.
Okay.
And her dad died. Their dad died when he was 44, I think. Anyway, Mom and her used to come down to Edina.
And
And they would clean houses. They'd be gone all day,
Oh,
clean
really?
houses, and they had a regular business going. And of course,
That was in her older days.
yeah. But these Edina people just loved those kids coming down.
Yeah.
They got
They-
all kinds of junk, whatever they
Oh, yeah.
didn't want,
Yeah,
they'd give
as they
them.
go through the
Okay.
place, every night they'd come home and they'd haul home suits and shoes, and I were on the ice, but my mother told, Monty, I got a whole bunch of shoes, try these on. They might fit you. Hey, that's a good pair, I'll wear those for a while. That's why I was 16, 15 years old. Yeah, I was about 15, 14.
See, when you don't have money, Sharon, all these things work.
Yeah, so when you were about 16 and she started cleaning houses.
Oh yeah, before that I was here, 14. You might have been pretty well
Really?
gone by then.
I
don't know.
was gone. I always thought Mother didn't start working until she was maybe 10 years before she died.
Oh, no. I was about 15, 16 years old, I remember that.
Really, you were still home?
I was still home. She and her and Clara used to go work and clean houses.
And they did that a couple days a week or every day?
I don't remember if
No,
I would
just-
just say, I would say a day or two a week, a couple
Yeah.
days a week.
Yeah.
She had too much other stuff going on.
Yeah.
But my mother used to go to Minneapolis about 3 or 4 times a year to Dayton's to go shopping with your kids. She'd take the car and load us up, get in the morning, and away we'd go to Minneapolis, go down there and buy school clothes and a few things that she could afford, and shoes, and back we'd come. And that was an all-day trip.
Dayton's Minneapolis downtown.
Yeah.
The big Dayton store.
Yeah, go down there and park, and I can remember her so
Without
well.
that store.
Yeah, I remember her so well because when we went down there, we automatically at high noon or 12:30 we went to the Nankin Cafe
Oh.
for chow mein and lunch, and I hated chow mein. I did, but after I ate it, a few different times, my God, I got to where I really loved chow mein. Do you remember going to the Nankin with her?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we
Do you? Do you remember that
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, and Susie remembers it. We talked about it, and she said she used to go shopping with Mother, and Mother always ended up in the basement at Donaldson's and or
Okay.
Daisy's.
Sure, that's
In
what
the,
they do.
Yeah.
what do you call that? Remnant department.
Stores, yeah.
And she said she was about 11 at the time. She would just be bored still.
Yeah.
Mom, can't we go home? She was telling me.
Hey, I'll tell you what.
Mom.
Did they have, so remnants, are you talking about fabric or?
Yeah, fabric and clothes
She
and all
had
that.
a lot of
Yeah,
drawers
just
full of
basement
fabric
sales.
Yeah,
stuff.
so like
She
I
made a
did.
lot of clothes out of it.
Yeah.
But
I know, I did too.
I remember my mother driving to Minneapolis and back was always a hairy ride.
I was gonna say, so she had a driver's license though,
Oh
or
yeah,
she drove?
She drove.
Oh, yeah, she drove.
But,
I started to drive when I was 11
Oh, yeah.
because
Oh,
they
really?
needed
We all
rovers,
never
and I was, I drove all over.
I was 12, 13. I used to drive dump truck for my dad.
Oh, I remember you talked about that before. You didn't have to do a driver's test back then, I take it.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah,
Sure.
but not a driver's test. Back in these, when I got my driver's license when I was 15, I put 35 cents up on the bar and filled a little document out, signed my name, and I got a driver's license. That's what it amounted to.
I
And
didn't
it-
have a license when I was 11, but that was.
No, you couldn't get one until you're 15.
Nobody
Nobody
said
stopped
one
you. I
word,
can't believe
not
nobody-
one word at that time.
Things
because-
were different.
Yeah.
But did you drive mostly just in town?
Yes.
Okay.
I taught all my friends to drive.
Yeah,
My
but-
dad finally caught me on that too, and I was with
But-
Ruthie Nierengarten one day when he caught us, and he looked over and he said, "Okay, Shirley, get in the back seat." And he jumped in front in the passenger side, and he said, "All right, Ruthie, let's see if you can drive."
Ruth, is she still alive?
Yeah.
Is she?
I just talked to somebody recently that said that she was still up at St. Benedict.
She's a nun, isn't she?
She taught mostly. She was teaching through all those years.
Her brother is the St. Cloud, the attorney of Stearns County, or was for a number of years, Roger Nierengarten.
They were twins.
And then her older brother, Bill Nierengarten, was the attorney general in Austin, Minnesota.
They all did good.
And they did well. They're both, attorneys.
So how many cars did you have?
One.
Well,
Just
yeah.
one car.
Well, my dad had
the truck.
My dad
One
had
car
the
and
truck
truck.
and one car until we got a little older, then I had a car there.
Yeah, but that was different.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when did you leave, Shirley? When?
I graduated from high school when I was 16 in 1942.
Oh, okay.
And I immediately went to Burbank in Minneapolis, and I lived at 2525 Lindale or something like that.
Linda,
Yeah.
That was in the days when you could rent a room for $25.
A month.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that Federal Reserve Bank was my first real job.
Oh, okay.
So that was 1942. I was gone.
But then,
Then how long did you ever go to school to become an attorney? I mean, did you?
oh, no,
actually
that's
go to
way
school?
later.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You went to radio school someplace.
Yeah, I went, a quick review is, I went to the Creamery, then I went to the Federal Reserve Bank for a year, and then I went to, what was the name, to that steel mill in Indiana, Gary, Indiana.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember that at all.
Well, yeah, that was fun.
How did you manage to get down there?
Well, Henrietta Dreesen, one of the girls that was in high school with me, and they had a big family in Cheska, was down there with her aunt and uncle. And so she said they pay 76 cents an hour. So
Oh,
off
my
I
God.
went to the steel mill. But it was really hard work. Really, you had these hot furnaces and you put these 20-foot rods in them, and they chop them on the other end. I had a little Negro man on the other end who'd catch them and put them into a die and chop them into railroad spikes. They made some other kind of big bolts also. But meanwhile, you had these big bundles of steel, 20 feet long, flying overhead constantly. Scared the bejesus out of me, to tell the truth. Then I came home because Mom had Tommy and she needed help. That was our excuse. At that time, you had to have a release from the federal government because it was war years.
Oh, really?
Then I came home and I went to Savage, and then I went to Minneapolis to the radio school.
Yeah,
It was called a Jippo Radio School, but it was there only to really kind of place you into either the railroad schools or into the Civil Aeronautics Administration.
Oh, okay.
And that was how I got to Alaska. I was in a big beef with the guy that was running the place, and I wanted to go to Oklahoma City because I heard that was the best for the CIA. And he said, no way, but you can go to Seattle and then go to Alaska.
Oh, okay.
And that's exactly what I did. I went to Seattle in fall of 1944. And there were girls from North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. The war wasn't over yet, and we went to school just like a job for 6 months.
Okay.
And learned navigation, radio navigation, meteorology, these various functions, International Morse Code, Klein-Smith, Bomi tape reading. And then we went to Alaska, and I was at GS7. I was a GS school cassette, which was at that time, the minute I got to Alaska, because I could do code. And then I was with them for 11 years before I went back to school. I went to University of Colorado in 1956 in June, and I graduated in 1961 in June. And I finished undergraduate degree and my law degree.
That was
But
in
it was on a-
Boulder, Colorado, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an accelerated program.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But I went continuously, except for 2
Oh, okay.
weeks, 6 weeks, one summer. But I did a paper while I was up there on the
So you got all 8 years
convention.
in pretty much in 4 years.
5.
5 years, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, 5 years.
Yeah, and then I went back, passed the bar exam, and did law for 42 years.
And that was back up in Alaska that you passed the bar exam?
Yeah, I went back to June. I still had a house there at that time, and my folks met me in Great Falls. We drove to Valdez. That was when Clara was so sick and Fred was so sick. And I actually took Clara to Anchorage for medical purposes. At that time, Mom and Dad were still in Valdez. But that gets to be a long story.
Okay.
But she always had to fix everything. Oh, when we got to Juneau, we redid that little house. Pushed the
So they
couch.
came up there too one time then?
Yeah, they came, we drove up and
Okay.
drove back. Dad's, always a story on Dad, you know, he wouldn't put new tires on the car before we left. Well, we blew every tire before we got
Did
there.
you drive
It
the
was
Elk?
too
Did you
scotty.
drive the Elkin Highway?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't remember that.
yeah, that was 1961 in the
Oh, okay.
fall.
But the road was better in those days, a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah, yeah, it was, but it's still, you know, Dad should have put new tires
Oh,
all the
yeah.
way around. It was a $500 car, but a great car as far as I was concerned.
Was that Dodge?
No,
No,
no, I don't know what happened.
This must have
to
been
Dodge.
Oldsmobile.
I drove that new Dodge back in 1948,
Yeah, that's right.
gave it to them. I'd worn out enough of their cars. You could still buy a brand new Dodge 4-door with, you know, all the trimmings for $2,800. I mean,
That was in 61?
money was different. Yeah, that was in 1948.
You're making
48.
you're making a buck an hour. You had a pretty good job in those days.
Yeah.
Times passed.
So then, then they came up there and they were up there for a little while, a month or something, or a couple weeks?
Yeah, no, they were there a couple months,
A
really.
couple months, oh, okay. What did they do with Mary Jane and Tom? Did they bring them with? Or were
No,
they past that age?
They were long gone at 61.
Yeah.
Let's see. I can't remember
Yeah,
just
see,
how old.
Yeah,
Tommy-
they would have been about 20.
Yeah, Mary Jane was born in 45. She'd
Yeah.
be 16. And,
She was probably home running
16,
around with
17.
Tom Glenn.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Tommy would have been 19 probably.
Yeah, he was gone though then
He was
too.
probably in France doing the show, what the heck was the name of that one again? He danced in the Hair.
Oh, he
You-
does in
yeah,
here?
yeah.
Yes. I
Did
do
you, that was
remember
the first,
I don't remember
that was the
either.
first risque show in, that you remember in the world, these ones we heard about.
And he danced that in France?
Yeah. He's got a, to this day, I don't know if you knew this or not, but Tommy has a child.
Oh, you know, I do remember that you said something about that one
and
time.
lives in France now. You know, who knows? I don't know if he ever...
She was Swiss.
Or Swiss, okay, but it was in France though, was it, that he had the baby? That,
I don't know. I tried to get some information.
Yeah, I could
on
never
it,
get
but
much
he
out of it.
told me to mind my own business.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I did
So you
too
never-
I
once.
got out of that real fast.
In fact,
But I
her-
still am
I
curious.
can't remember. Her father was a fairly rich man.
Yeah, he was.
He owned a lot of property. I can't remember if it was in Paris or in some other state.
Well, he had a deal with that family, the Girona family, that he wouldn't interfere or get involved with the child.
Oh, okay.
And he really didn't want to. I'm not sure just why he had the child to start with. But, except that she
I heard
wanted a
rumors that
child.
she wanted to have a child with him.
Right.
Oh,
That's
so it
the way
wasn't just an accident, it was sort of a
Yeah,
plan.
that's
to
the,
do
well,
it.
I don't know if
Planned
that's the truth.
accident.
I don't know if that's the truth or not.
Well, how did he get to how did all his dancing stuff start?
Well,
Tommy was always a dancer.
he was
Your
creative.
mother used to take him for dancing lessons. What
Oh,
you
really?
guys
'Cause I
talking
remember,
about?
didn't you guys do baton or something too?
Yes.
Because we had those costumes. Or Susie and Mary Jane.
Tommy did baton, but she used
It
to
was-
take him for dancing lessons too.
It was Bob's girlfriend, wife, later, Beverly.
Beverly.
That
Yeah.
was,
Oh,
they
okay.
used to lead the drum and boogie corps in Juneau,
Oh, that's
I mean in
right.
Chaska. And they would travel all over, and Susie got into it big time, and Tommy got into it big time.
Oh,
But that's
But
how you-
Tommy
if
was
you-
also a very good ice skier.
Yes,
I
yes,
remember
he
that
was, yeah.
more. And he
Oh,
was
okay.
in the Ice Capades in Minneapolis.
Oh,
and-
really?
Yeah, yeah, those were creative times for him. He was 16, 17,
Okay.
and his next destination was New York.
Yeah, I mean, eventually he had another career, but he was in New York. And
Oh, wow. So he just took dancing at a local studio or whatever?
Not local Minneapolis.
He went to Minneapolis for dance?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But Tommy was probably 20 years ahead of his time. Tommy was one of the first kids with the long hair.
Okay.
You see the picture of John earlier with the long hair and that? Well, Tommy was quite a ways ahead of all those guys before these kids wore the long hair. I remember Ken and I used to give Tommy a bad time because he'd come around with this long hair. We swore we were going to get a shear and cut him off for him. You know, my mother would have killed us. But
See, I don't remember those.
Well, you were
pictures.
gone.
I was really gone.
they were in Alaska. Well, see, Tommy went to work for me for about 6 months.
Oh, really? When were you there?
And that was when I was running the parts department at university. That would have been around in the early 50s. I was running the parts department, and Tommy didn't have a job, and I told Dad, I said, bring him down, he's going to work for me. So he was working there. He was doing great, he loved it there, really. But he was not where he wanted to be. He wanted to be dancing or something. And I remember he coming in, and he said he wanted to go into the services after World War II, or not World War II, over after the Korean War. He was going to go into the service, and Dad and Ken was involved. They felt, well, it'd be great if he went in the service. He grew up a little bit. In the meantime, he's dancing and everything else. He was going to go into service. But before he went in the service, he wanted a couple months off to have a little fun before he went to service.
Oh.
Dad said, well, I think that would be great. Why don't we do it? So, you know, and I didn't want, no, stay working, you know. But they finally decided they wanted to, Dad said, well, so he quit the job. He was working with me, and he was doing fine. He quit his job and went funny, but he never went in the service. You know, all of a sudden, Tommy's in, I don't know where he was after, where he went from there, but I sort of lost track of it after a while.
So he was in New York for a while, and then he ended up going to France. And
Well, I don't really know exactly where he was all at. Do you remember, Cheryl?
I was gone.
Yeah, but I know he was over in France for quite a while dancing. And like I say, you every once in a while get a book on, you can read the show about the movie called Hair,
Yeah.
and he danced in that show. And of course, eventually Tommy ended up in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
dancing in Hallelujah Hollywood for a number of years. And Rose and I'd see him quite often then. You know, a couple times a year we'd go out to Las Vegas, or we'd be out at a meeting someplace, and we'd run into Tom, or call Tom, and him and his girlfriend, what's her name again? Maureen. And him and Maureen, and she was just a friend of his. And we'd meet him after the show at 2 o'clock, and we're 2:30, have a midnight, you know, after show snack with him.
Yeah.
But in fact, Maureen
And
is
your
the one.
two brothers were at a show one night, go to sleep.
No, just
David?
Just David fell asleep. John never
Oh.
fell asleep. John never let him forget that, because it was, you know, that was when they had the topless shows.
Oh,
there.
topless shows.
And they couldn't get in, they were too young.
So Tommy took him upstairs.
So Tommy took him up in the, where the lights are and everything is set up there. And John, of course, is sitting over there watching it all. And David falls asleep. But
Yeah.
David was probably 12 or 13 at the time. But, in fact, Maureen is the Rose and Maureen talk. to get Tippy her job in the
Yeah,
Siegfried
but Tommy
Road.
helped.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tommy.
okay. Oh, she's still the one that's still there, huh?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
was running
she's still, well, she
I-
did run the choreography with,
Siegfried Roy.
Oh, okay.
But since the show
Anyway, we're
was
getting off-
disbanded now, that's probably gone. so.
Yeah, we're getting off the beaten track here.
Yeah.
Bob, we haven't talked about Bob. He was one of my favorites when I was still
That thing's
home.
still
you know.
running?
Yep.
And I don't really remember a heck of a lot about Bob though either. What were some of the accidents with Bob?
Well, Bob was, I can remember one, he had this 1953
Convertible?
Ford convertible. Really a classy car. He'd run that thing all over. Bob's out whooping it up to dances and drinking or whatever the case is. He was going down the road on what we call the Prairie Road, where the sugar factory is in Chaska.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And somewhere in the middle, anyway, he lost it. He hit a telephone pole dead center. You could just see the telephonium print in the front of the car, you know. And we always would laugh at it. But he had it fixed and went off. I remember another night he was driving home and he sort of halfway fell asleep coming from up by Glencore, Norwood. And he veered over the line. And you know, I used to drive with your arm on the window and driving along, your arm out there. And he sort of fell asleep and he clipped the mirror on the left-hand side where he went along. The truck was coming on, hit that mirror, broke that mirror right off. Scared the heck out of him because he had his arm on. I don't know how to miss the arm. But it took the mirror right off the car. And of course, it woke him up pretty quick in a hurry.
The one I remember that was really scary was he and Bev were driving, coming down by Lanos, again, coming down that sharp hill from where Ron has his house.
Well, for coming from Cologne that way, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that hill by the
Down
Lano
around
farm
there.
there, yeah.
And they went right underneath a big semi.
Oh, my
They-
God.
I do
they
remember a little
killed
about that, yeah.
very easily that night, and how they got under there and got out of that, I'll never know. But I think that was the end of the convertible.
You might be right. I
Totally, my mother didn't like that story at all, and I think she kept that pretty quiet.
might have been. I've heard
But it
something
was-
about it. But, you know, I'm sure they both ducked down and it went right underneath.
Right
I think.
underneath. Oh, my
It
God.
was just, you know, Ken had a really bad accident too. You and Linda were dating. I don't know just all the story to that one too, but
I don't remember that at all.
oh yeah.
You may we
You
could
could
reflect.
ask those guys about it. Again, some of these things they don't really want you to know.
Well, see, the problem back in those
They're all
days already.
partying.
See, when you're talking about Ken and Linda dating and later on, see, I'm off to school, and after that I'm working in St. Paul and Minneapolis. Now I wasn't around Chaska, so I don't know.
Oh
Ken,
yeah, but Monty, Ken and Linda were still dating then.
Yeah, but I was in college.
Oh, sure, of course.
I was at St. Thomas.
So
I
Ken,
didn't see him. I'd see him, you know, but once in a while, one a weekend or that.
he just stayed in Chaska the whole time. Ken.
Oh no, he was off to the war.
Boy, in the
No,
war.
in the war, that's
Yeah,
right.
for 4
He
years.
was in the submarine service. I thought he was gone 6 years for some reason.
I think he went in 41, came back in 45. I think he's gone 4 years. Never home in 4 years.
Oh, and he was in the submarine. he said?
Yeah, the submarine service.
He was, I know he was in Australia for a while, but I
Well, what they used to
I
do,
don't know that whole story.
what they used to do, they go out and they get duty for 3 months in submarine service. And they dumped in Australia, give them a month off. And in Australia, I was kidding them, like, how many girlfriends you got in Australia? You know, and they let them in Australia for a month. They didn't come back home, but they'd have a month off to whoop it up and take life easy. And
He didn't have a very easy life in the submarine service. Don't let him give you an easy life.
Oh, that's terrible.
When he came home, that was one of the reasons of the accident. They thought, they weren't really sure, but he was still blacking out at
Oh.
times, and pretty scary for him.
So did he know Linda before he went into the service, or he met her
No.
afterwards?
I think you're gonna have to.
He had a bunch of girlfriends, like when he said, I know that he had the Italian girl. She was really cute. And we better not get too far into this, but he had
Yeah.
a girl in Australia also.
Oh, okay.
But Bob was, you know, Bob and Ken both ended up working for NSP.
Oh, that's right.
You know how they did that?
Oh,
In I would guess it was 1947, 46. They were all home, and they were building a big high line. Donovan Construction was building a big high line across through Chaska, Victoria, Waconia, I don't know, all through that area out there. And it was 25, 30 below. And they got these great big towers, these big metal towers you see.
yeah.
They get up there and they just, putting people were putting them together. Anyway, the workers wouldn't work. Donovan, the workers they had wouldn't work. It's too cold.
Okay.
So these people were just looking for workers of any kind. So Ken, who did ice fishing, and Bob, they got all their ice fishing clothes on. Hey, we'll do that for you. A bunch of people in Chaska went over there and they started turning, all it is putting bolts in. And guy telling, here, put this piece there, and they're crawling up on these high lines in the middle of winter, colder than heck, and they're doing all this. Well, they went to work for Donovan for a while, and they stayed with him after these other people went to work, so they stayed with him. In fact, Bob became a foreman for Donovan Construction, traveled all over the Midwest, and fixed high lines and did that for about, 4, 5, 6 years, 4 years. Ken only worked for him for about a year. Ken figured out that if he took the test, he could become an electrician for NSP. And Urban Knotts helped Ken with the, because Urban helped Ken with the test, and Ken passes the test. So he went to work for NSP, which was a great job. Well, a couple of years after, 3, 4 years after, Bob kept traveling around, and Bob eventually, looked over to Ken, hey, that's a great deal, why don't I see if I can do it? So Bob took the test, and he also passed the test and went to work for NSP. That's how you both happened to go to work for NSP.
So they just took like an electrician
Yeah,
test
sure,
or
it's a
whatever.
test. I'm sure I don't know what it all was. I'm sure it was a written test plus other things they had to do. But they both went to work for NSP. And then Ken worked for him for about 20 years. And as he got into as he went along, in fact, I remember Ken almost got killed one night doing some work, and one of the other guys got burned pretty bad, but Ken was just away from the downtown, and he died or something down here. And but Ken, after 20, he started selling the bait. I think I told you that story. With, starting selling bait and all that stuff out of his house and that. And one thing that he finally decided, heck, well, I'm just going to run a bait business. And he quit NSP. But
No, he retired from NSP. He worked for NSP long after he had started the bait business.
Oh yeah, he worked for him and did the bait business besides.
Right.
But he had 20 years with NSP, and he quit. He wasn't retired. He could retire. He had 20 years in it. And he quit, went in the bait business, but he didn't get a pension until he got to be, I think, 65. He gets a pension from NSP, but his pension isn't as big as it would have been if he'd have stayed on. But he only had 20 years in with NSP. And I talked to him just a while back, and but he didn't come. He retired from NSP, but it wasn't like he was 65 when he retired.
Yeah,
he was probably 40. 45, 48, something like that, when he retired, went to the bait business, really.
Maybe they had a couple stores with that.
But then he started a sporting goods store in Shasta.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. And he had that going for a while.
The
In fact, him and Linda worked pretty hard in that for a long time.
Yeah.
But then he finally looked at it and said, I can make way more money just selling bait than fooling around at the sporting goods store. So he got out of it. I don't know if he sold it or I can't remember.
Steve took over for a while.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I know he did.
And
he couldn't make it. He didn't have his nose to the grindstone.
It was a tough business at best because they're competing against the big. Back in those, they just started competing against the bigger stores.
Yeah.
And everything else.
So in his bait business, then he had a couple bait shops too, because then he had one down in Minneapolis. And
Yeah,
stuff
he bought one on Lake Street for a while. He had a big
Yeah.
shop there, down there. He had a guy running it, and he'd go down there 1 day or 2 days a week. And I think he eventually sold it out to that guy because it was more trouble than it was worth.
Yeah.
But he really got into the wholesale bait business. And little by little, he got more and more of it, which is the business Ronnie
Ron's
runs
still
today.
running that, right?
Yeah.
They still have that right on where they live, right?
Yeah, right.
He does that all. He does all those deliveries and stuff.
Can he? No, he doesn't do much anymore.
No, my Ron. He does all this.
Well, he got about 16 people. I think he worked for 20 people.
Oh, is that, oh, really?
Maybe more than that now, I know, but he's got like 16 trucks that are running around, like quite a few
Oh,
trucks.
wow.
They still do angleworms and,
Leeches, minnows.
yeah, well, the minnows is their main business.
Okay.
So they have to send out guys to catch those. They do that with 13-foot Boston whalers and traps, round
Okay.
traps.
Really, if you've never gone out, it's really quite an interesting business.
So where do they catch those minnows? Where, is
In
it
the
here?
lakes.
Just here?
Yeah, and they
All
put-
over Minnesota.
Yeah, they put
They
these
go
little-
down as far as South
Yep.
Dakota.
Yeah,
to the
you ever see their
border.
traps? They're just a big screen deal, and they put them in, and there's a way in, but they can't get back out because it's a cone type deal going in, so the minnows can swim in, but they can't get out. They leave it down there for a couple of days and put some kind of bait or something inside, and eventually they go down there, pull it up, hey, we got all kinds of minnows. They take them out, sort them out.
They're usually in about 6 feet of water, so they're not very deep. They have a
Oh,
little,
okay.
what do they call them, buoy on the
Oh,
top.
okay.
I went with them one day. You ought to go down and ask
Well,
Ron if
someday-
you can go along just for fun. He'll let you.
Oh, okay, so that's around, I mean, he sets those traps and.
No, he doesn't do it, he got people doing it. now.
Yeah,
He just
but-
controls, that's what the, yeah, the deal is. Let me tell you, they even set them in the wintertime.
Oh, really?
Sure.
You know what they do in the wintertime?
Oh.
They take a big chainsaw, the long ones, like that, and they turn the blade backwards.
Oh,
And
really?
they take the ice and down through the ice. They cut a chunk out, and they cut a chunk of ice out, dig it out. Now they get a hole, they put the net down, and they leave it there.
The pot.
The pot, the pottery. So then they leave it there, and 3-4 days later, they walk over the ice, pull it out, dig the hole again. By the time it's frozen shut again, so they got to
Yeah.
cut it open again and take the thing out.
Wow.
It's that's how they get leeches and, but
Oh, okay.
the leeches are really caught in